Where do you think farms will end up within the digital ag tech space? What sort of ag tech have you got on your farm? Are you stuck in the mud? What to look for? How to know if it's actually going to enhance and improve what you're doing on your farm? You probably want to save money. You want to save time like we all do. But there's a bit of a gap in between that. And our guest, Emma Leonard, bridging the gap between agriculture, the farmers out there, the employees as well, because they're probably a vital part in this, of the onboarding especially. Between farming and ag tech, she's got a PhD in using change management and maturity models to help family farming businesses unlock the value of digital agriculture. And we kept it digital in how we got onto Emma. We found her on Twitter and she was tweeting some pretty good things. So we thought we'd ask her on the podcast, and here she is. Well, we'll get started into it. Emma Leonard, thank you very much for coming on to the Farms Advice podcast.
Thank you for having us.
And like a lot of things in Australian agriculture, if you're on Twitter, you get to find out a lot of people and what we do and what others are doing, especially. That's where I saw you, Emma, and I thought it'd be really a cool episode to get you on board and see what your experiences are. And funnily enough, you're on the York Peninsula as well as the first episode of the year with Ben. So welcome to the podcast. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of where you are, what you do, and like your role in agriculture?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Jack. Basically, I've been in Australia for about the last 20 years, came out from the UK, was a Nuffield scholar there, and before I came to Australia, ran research and demonstration farms. So when I came over here, I was with the CRC for Soil and Land in the communications department, and ever since then, I've continued working up that interface between researchers, new technology, and actual on-farm application. So I run my own business from a farm in York Peninsula, as you were saying, which is Agri Know-How, and basically work as a consultant, and got a bit of a passion for digital agriculture.
Yeah, well, it's just going leaps and bounds at the moment, isn't it? And it's probably has been right across your career in agriculture for, you say, the 20 years you've been sort of dealing with the uptake of digital in ag?
Well, I guess, new technology ranges right across the spectrum, but digital's probably had one of the biggest impacts for remote working, as we know from COVID and everything. But it wasn't that a great relief when everybody would start doing Zoom meetings with us and things like that. But the technologies really have started to catch up with the needs. But yeah, so I've worked in the adoption of a lot of different technologies and practices over the years.
Amazing. Well, I'm keen to get into it to see how it sort of all works. I've got a lot of questions of you, Emma, but also of the industry. What's some New Year's resolutions that you set for yourself, though, for 24, and maybe where you'd like the digital industry side of it in agriculture to be?
I'd just love us to have more reliable connectivity. Starlink's been an amazing game changer, but it's still quite hard work keeping everything together.
Why is that a pain point? Like what did you want to use off the back of it?
What do I want to use? Well, just having reliable connectivity at the moment. I'm totally Wi-Fi and only have connectivity in the office. I'm always researching what the new options are, and the cost effectiveness of those options. So eventually, and we'll talk a lot more about this in the interview, I'm sure, but once we've got our whole processes digitized, then we're really going to get the agricultural digital revolution. But we're still quite a way in the messy middle.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hiccup there. We've got like farm apps that we use, but we can only use it when we're in the Wi-Fi. We had quite good service before. Could do it when we're going up the lane, sitting behind sheep or something, making sure everything's up to date. and it's just that sort of that lag, and then you get home and then you forget, and it builds up. And it's 3 weeks down the track, and the data records aren't aligning. Yeah, so I'm in the same boat as you, wanting better connection and see how we go. We've also got Starlink at home, quite quick, and especially for podcasting, I think it works pretty good.
When it's working really well. But I think the other thing, we've moved from sort of Excel spreadsheet hell because we were doing loads of things on spreadsheets. Then we've got all these apps, but nothing's really integrated. So we've really got to have processes and data flows to get us to be able to really embrace and capitalize on the digital revolution.
That's it. I think capitalizing on it is probably the most important thing going forward. I want to touch on practical ag and connecting it to the research that you mentioned before. That's something that I'm keen to sort of work with on the podcast, because a lot of this research is sort of held in as research and not all applicable to the farmers in a medium that they can sort of divulge it or go through it. Endless research out there, great research, but it's just not getting to the end users, the farmers. How do you sort of see tackling this, and why are you tackling it?
Well, we're sort of going away from what you were thought we were going to talk about with you, but with as you say, there's a huge amount of research, and
Yep.
a lot of that's held in within the universities or within the RDCs. And I know they are already starting to work very hard and look at the opportunities of generative AI to actually pull out a lot of that information. But again, we will be hitting a lot of hurdles because of the way the data's been stored in the past. We haven't had consistency of storage and recording. But all of that, as we're going forward, we will start seeing greater integration and more information that's actually readily accessible.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty paramount for farmers to make it accessible as well. Reading through the work you've done, mentioning of we're on the fourth wave of innovation within Australian farms. Talk to me about what is this wave? Is it the digital wave, and how's it sort of unraveling?
So I worked in communication for 20 odd plus years, and it was very much a top down approach. And so here's the information, go away and use it. And I was getting frustrated that I actually couldn't see whether I was having any impact. So I took a step I never thought I'd do and decided to do a PhD, which looked at change management. And so part of that was actually working out how we could address change management in digital ag. And so the basis was, well, where are we now? And we really are at the early phase of this fourth wave. So the first wave was mechanisation, Jethro Tull and his seed drills and early tractors, and really moving from manual and horse-drawn applications. So back in the beginning of the 20th century. Then middle to late 20th century, we had the Green Revolution, where we really had the ag chems coming in and a lot of the fertilizers. And then after that, we had in really the early 21st century, the precision ag really starting to take hold. Some people would say precision ag is actually a form of digital ag, but digital ag really takes us to the next level, where we're really analyzing, integrating all of that database material, using machine learning, using artificial intelligence, and also then being able to use automation. So, as we said at the beginning, we're at the earliest stages of that, and it's still a bit of a muddle, but it's a very exciting period coming through.
Is there a bit of a time frame within CSIRO and what within your experience of when farmers will be up with it from that middle stage of what you described? I saw the image of the analog, the scramble, and also the digital ag. When are we sort of looking for this, or is it very independent coming down to the different farmers out there?
Look, It's very independent of the different businesses and the farmers' attitudes. Um, One of the things I'm a great believer in, that if you're going to get change, we have to involve the whole team and we have to engage the different team members' skills, because so often the person that's um, taking the role to lead the change, and for successful change, you do need to have a leader who's got responsibility for the change. They don't have to do everything, but they have to make sure everything is done. Um, is often someone who's not very digitally literate and really doesn't want this change to happen in the first place. So it's not a great starting point. Um, but to move digital transformation has to go through or embrace three phases. So you've got the digitization of data. So once we go to mobile phones, fax machines, even digital photography, um, and all our sort of app-based type things are really digitization of data. I'll advertise AgriWeb. It says it's the digitization of the farm notebook. Um, so that's really just digitization of the data. The next phase is digitalization, which really means when you start integrating multiple streams of data into one place and getting a new outcome. So where we're getting say, for example, soil moisture data plus weather data plus how much water I've already put on for an irrigation, and then it actually fills in my irrigation schedule for me and starts it operating. That's digitalization. Or if it really actually makes a decision and changes the schedule, for example, then it becomes digitally transformed. So once we get to automation and things like that, that's really a digitally transformed system. So I think it's really important to remember it's not just from A to B, there are these multiple steps within it.
Yeah, there's definitely some layers in there. There was a question on the back end of, like, not on the podcast before, like behind the scenes, about like the different ag techs wanting to become the home of everything. Is there an option where there'll be everyone will be able to integrate with different ag tech levels, or is it going to be sort of siloed into these larger ag tech companies that are able to bring it on labor wise, but also with their technology, their finances, with the money available? Is that how you see it happening?
I think it's going to be a bit of both. I mean, we just have to look at other industries,
Yeah.
and it tends to be a bit of both. We are going to have the big companies; they buy out smaller ones and bring it all in together. And we know that in agriculture, or we know particularly in precision agriculture, to make it successful, a lot of people have gone to one brand because they get less integration hiccups. Um, but providing systems have got an API, we're going to be able to share data. So, we're already seeing things like Agwell sharing an API with Zero, so we can actually get farm financials data and product activity data coming together. So, basically, we've we've established that a lot of Agtech in Australia hasn't put APIs in place. And so that's come as a secondary thing. And this is why we actually have a lot of siloing at the moment. Um, and often we don't actually need Agtech to do the job. We need a digital technology. um, as I mentioned, Zero is not an ag tech, but it will help my business run better. So I
Yeah.
think it's sometimes it's going to be important to be picking up the big things, and customizing them for our own needs rather than trying to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, I think like with creating the APIs, it would just make it very competitive for the ag techs. Probably come down to what the banks are doing, like similar to what the banks are doing, lowest interest sort of win, to get new customers in the door. Where do you see that sort of space being within agriculture? Should it be? It's hard to know, isn't it? Because we're so loyal to our apps, our bankers, our accountants, and everything. Once we're sort of signed on, the companies sort of feel like I've got this person for lifetime value now.
Well, I mean, and setting up your programs and your systems always takes a lot of time, whether we like it or not. And we just don't want to have to keep doing that. So that's the important thing with the technology that you're buying. It's really important that you can download your data and then use it to upload into other systems or a new system. To give you some redundancy if a platform falls over, goes bust, or gets sold out and becomes a very Americanized platform and doesn't really suit our needs. But I think maybe also what you're getting at is what's the value proposition here. And there was a really great bit of work that was done back in 2017 called the Precision to Decisions, the first stage of that. And that identified that there are 5 aspects. Well, they included a value proposition. They said 6 aspects that actually drive whether you get a decision to uptake digital agriculture. Further research that I did actually shows that 5 of those aspects actually underpin the value proposition. And so that's your connectivity, whether you've actually got digital literacy to use these things, your trust and of the data, the validity of the data, and how your data is being used, and the legal agreements that go with it. Whether there are available data sets to actually underpin and work as the controls, or to actually drive the new technology that's required, and then the whole analysis of the data that's produced out of the other end. So you've not every digital ag technology is going to need each of those at the same degree, but all of them need to be addressed. And if they're not all addressed, the likelihood of having a successful technology is lower.
Yeah, okay. So there's a fair few big words coming out there. Well, I may have to pull you up for anything flying over my head because we're just farmers listening in here. But it's fantastic work and just pulling on your experiences why I was so keen to get you on. Before we look into unlocking the value for family farms, that's probably the majority, family corporates as well. What sort of precision ag are you looking into? Like what sort of applications? What are we looking at? Are we looking at like livestock, like cropping, arable, or like the horticulture? What's your experiences within those, and what's probably the largest sector at the moment?
Oh, well, largest and most advanced are not necessarily the same thing. Intensive intensive cropping, so greenhouse type situations, highly developed in terms of their digital processes and the systems that they're using. But nice enclosed, controlled environments. So a lot of the problems that we experience in broadacre are reduced. But yeah, so probably intensive protected cropping is at the front, and dairy. And dairy gets really forgotten about, it seems, in my opinion. But we've had robots in dairy for over 30 years now. It's actually the only industry for many years that had any robotic systems. But then all the rest of them are probably all moving along reasonably together. But obviously cropping, really the game changer there was auto steer. And a lot of people went to auto steer and then really didn't go beyond with precision ag. They might have gone to section control. That's another great improvement, but they haven't actually gone to the variable rate management for multiple reasons. But that's the phase we're really moving into in the cropping area. And again, in the livestock area, we're really moving into much more precision pasture management with virtual fencing and things like that really coming into play, and precision inputs in terms of dosing rates and things like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting space. And being a mixed farmer, we actually got auto steer. Probably had it for 2 years now, and yeah, it's a game changer for planting, spraying, everything. Just makes life so much easier. Has there been any research on the difference of
like obviously for farmers, the expense of this ag tech, you can't onboard everything on the same day. Delaying that sort of like year one, you buy auto steer, year two, you buy weed seeker or something like that. Um, is there like a sort of way to find out the costs of not having that piece of ag tech over that time? So, like, if you didn't have auto steer from the 2 years and then you had it, what that difference is?
I think there was some research in the cropping area where they did some economic analysis of precision agriculture,
They're much better words.
and sorry,
There were much better choice of words. I should have said economic analysis.
sorry, and I don't think I don't think they've actually taken it from an opportunity cost or a loss point of view, but you can see the benefit. So really, you could argue, well, you've got to look at your cash flows, and if you're going to borrow money to buy that weed seeker, is the cost benefit in year two enough, and etc. But there's certainly more economic data out there than there has been for a while, but it's still in the pure digital side of things, it's still sometimes quite hard to get that value proposition, because it's more than just making money. Usually, the reason people are wanting to change, and you mentioned it yourself with the auto steer, it's made life easier. It might have made life safer. It might mean you've got more time, so you're not having to be somewhere. Not having to go out and turn that pump on physically. You can do it from your mobile phone. So where we've seen really good uptake are tools that have improved farmers' lifestyle in many respects, and then add to the bottom line. So if I don't have to do that tank run because I can check all the tanks remotely, etc. So and as soon as those technologies tick the boxes, farmers take them up. Don't the uptake or the delay in uptake is nothing to do with farmers' reticence. It's much, much more to do with the tech not clearly demonstrating value.
Is that through the user, like the interface, the UX of it, or is that because of the salesperson, do you think? Look, like selling that value coming across, whether it's at like a agricultural event, ag quip, or I don't know, for one down near you, Henty, closest one I can think of to SA.
York Peninsula Field Days.
Yeah, didn't know it existed, now I do.
Yeah. I would certainly never point the finger at the salespeople. I think they do their best, but I don't think they've always had the engineering backup. I don't think they've always had the robust tools in the first place. Sometimes things have gone out there that shouldn't have gone into the market in the first place. They just weren't ready. I think the whole sort of startup fail fast sort of approach that has been used in other industries doesn't work in agriculture. We have to be so self-reliant, and we've got so many factors that are really out of our control. We have to manage about 9 different systems within our businesses, and only about 2 of those we have much control over. So farmers tend to be very cautious investors. They want to see reliability. They want to see it working, and they want to see it in with backup, and also that they can modify it themselves. And that is a challenge with digital.
Yeah, we sort of saw that with the John Deere, like their operating system, how you couldn't sort of work with it at home in the shed. You had to take the computer back to the shop and get it done. And then they got that law passed, I believe. So you can start to modify what's going on, or you can work with the digital system within it as well.
Yes, and some of the legislation doesn't actually help us that much. We can't use virtual fencing in South Australia. Well, I think the only states you can use it in are Queensland and Tasmania, for example. They're working on it, but they've been working on it for about 3 years. They're changing the legislation.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a lag in what's happening. Do you think the companies need to exist before the policy will chase up anyway? Sadly.
Probably.
Yeah. So unlocking the value for family farms, family corporates as well, within your consulting, what are the sort of questions that they're asking for you to automate what they do, improve their daily routine? Are they looking to save time, save costs?
Well, yes, generally they're looking to save time and costs, as you say, but also to improve overall productivity, so efficiency in time, but also efficiency on inputs. Particularly thinking with the pressures that we're getting for Scope 3 emissions and issues relating to biodiversity and monitoring what we're actually doing. So at the moment, I don't tend to work directly with farming businesses. I'd love to be doing that and actually taking some of the tools that I developed in my PhD and working with them to look at their digital skills and their digital processes, because they've really got to understand what they want to do and why they want to do it before you're going to have a successful change. And if you don't actually understand how the change you want to make fits into your process, you might end up really just changing from a manual to a digital recording system, but it actually hasn't advanced your efficiencies, even your time saving very much. You might have created more work sometimes.
Yeah, there is a fair bit of that going on. Because you're in a unique position, like sort of hovering in between ag techs, consulting, and also farming businesses, what do you see that ag techs aren't doing correctly throughout the process of delivering their service, but also talking with the farmers, communicating through their technology at large?
Well, I think it's not just the Agtech developers that need to be considered how things could be improved. We basically they need to remember that whatever they put into the market has got to be 9 times better than what I do at the moment, because I overestimate by 3 times the value of what I already do and how I do it and my satisfaction with an existing product. And I devalue a new product coming in, convinced that it's not going to work and whatnot, by 3 times, and the seller increases it by 3 times. So they've really got to try and get their expectations realistic. And often we hear them go, we're just targeting the top end of the market. Well, agriculture is such a small market that if you can't really have something that's going to scale for the early majority and the middle sort of 70% of farmers, then you're not going to have a viable business. But I also go back to this whole lack of process, because you might have the most perfect individual technology, but if it doesn't fit into a process, or if the process hasn't even been defined, and I think this is something we really need to work harder at in agriculture, is to really think about what, and I've done a few projects in this area, Jack, but really look at a spray process, for example. What's it look like digitally? What's the digitalized and what's the digitally transformed version? And then what are the technologies? Where does that data go through? What sort of skill sets and backup are we going to need to actually make sure that works on farm? And if we take the spray process and actually work that through, then we've got all our compliance records would be automated. So literally, your weather data, your application maps, etc., would all come together and bang it on a single button. That would all be sprouted out and a report produced. At the moment, we've got aspects of that process digitalized, but we certainly haven't got it to a fully digitalized process, and definitely not anywhere near being digitally transformed.
What about onboarding difficulties? Trying to, as you said before, convey that value. How can Agtech sort of convey that value better? Because it's really hard to understand what that piece of Agtech's going to do, especially if it's a software like a livestock app, AgriWeb or mobile or something like that. You don't know until you're on there, you've implemented your data, and you've got a bit of a roll on there. How do we know that this application is going to be for me?
Well, I guess it goes back to, again, knowing what you want to achieve and why,
So
and
writing down.
knowing. Sorry.
So just for the farmers, just to write down a few questions before even approaching an ag tech or even going to the event.
Absolutely. I mean, as you would if you're buying a new vehicle or a new farm, you're going to have criteria that you want to meet. You're going to have specifications that it has to match up with other equipment, things like that. So you just, in many respects, it's approaching it in the same way, but unfortunately, because it's digital, a lot of people don't necessarily know the questions to ask. Um, and and also, by bringing in the whole team, it's really important to get everybody on the same page, because if you haven't, then that person that's out of it is actually going to destabilize the change and make it less likely to happen, and you're equally not likely to engage the best skills within the group. And what's really interesting within my PhD, I actually looked at this and found that in all the farming family businesses that I worked with, they had different interpretations of where they were in their level of digitalization of different aspects of the farming business. So we broke the farming business into 21 different sectors within business management, production management, and sales and marketing.
There's a lot of things that sort of go on. It's funny, just how small the landscape is for Australian agriculture as well. Going for the top sort of producers, you're locking out 99% of the industry there, and it's probably, I would love to help the bottom half of the producers, just to upkeep them, get them moving along, to build them up, and that's going to build the industry up a lot more than the top producers that already have the sort of mindset to tackle these sort of challenges, I think, out there.
It's a very worthy cause, and I think they'd be very open to it. And the more young people we get coming through in those businesses, the more opportunities there are to drive some change.
Absolutely. What are you most interested in, or like what are you working on at the moment there, Emma? Because of these large sort of revolutions that's happened in agriculture, what's the next best thing that you're working on?
The next best thing I'm working on, I can't actually tell you about at the moment because we're still waiting for the contracts to come through. But it will be very exciting and very much in line with what we've been talking about. What I am working on at the moment is using one of the evaluation tools that I developed. We've actually changed it round to look at soil connectivity. So that gets a bit confusing when we've been talking about digital, but soil connectivity is a term that the soil scientists have decided to use in relation to how humans interact with their soil, specifically in relation to soil security. So we know there are 5 factors that drive whether your soil is secure, i.e. whether your soil is going to be there to farm productively in the future. And the human influence and connectivity and appreciation is part of that. We've never had a way to measure that before. So with the University of Sydney and Australian Farm Institute, I've developed an evaluation tool for that. And the big difference between having an evaluation and a survey, I'd just like to point out, is at the end of your evaluation, you as a farmer who's completed it get a report and access to a whole heap of resources, because a survey is just I collect your data, and you have no idea what happens to it and where it goes. So I'd love people right across Australia to be contributing to that evaluation. But I think that it will also help you see as farmers that there are ways of us using evaluation tools like that to then be able to target the information that you really need. So I think I said at the beginning, I'd always worked on a very top-down approach. I'm trying to use the evaluation process to actually work on a much more bottom-up approach, so that you can have the information you specifically want, Jack, which takes a bit of time to refine it, but that's really what I'm working on at the moment.
Beautiful. How do we get a hold of that evaluation tool? Can I put it in as a link?
Yes, that'd be wonderful. If you'd like to put it in as a link, I'll send that to you. You've possibly seen it on Twitter as well, but I can send you some info for a link.
Yeah, I'll have to test my own soils. You know, I might even divulge what's happening with the own evaluation tool. I think that's a pretty cool thing, and these things really need to be accessible to Australian farmers. And like, I would never know that unless you came on. So I think that's a good thing. Something in our own toolbox as a farmer as well.
It's very hard to get a message out, and different people receive their information in different ways. So, this particular project's going right across Australia. We've had it in front of a lot of people, and people go, "Oh, I didn't see that," and I'd be doing the same. So it's just one of those
That's
hassles in life.
very typical of agriculture.
Oh,
So
human nature.
when was your Nuffield? When did you do that?
Oh, a very long time ago. Now you're going to work out how old I am. I did my Nuffield back in 1993 when I was in the UK. I was the first scholar to ever go to Argentina, amongst other things.
What was your field of study?
Well, as long as you promise you don't laugh, I looked at large dairy herds, which
Yep.
was 500 or more cows run through one dairy shed. So, at the time I was running 120 cow dairy, which was double the average herd size in the UK. The largest dairy herd in the United States in 93 was 2,000 cows. 2 years later, it gone to 10,000 cows.
It's probably at 100,000 now.
Sort of.
Nearly, not close. But I was trying to see if you've made any comparisons across the world of ag tech, because your in-depth sort of research, maybe something you've done with Syro or a project. Have you done much with what's going on globally in terms of ag tech and improving farms?
Look, I try to keep abreast. It is difficult. Quite a few years ago now, I had the opportunity and went to the Precision Ag conference in Asia, the Asian Precision Ag conference in Korea. Then I went on to the European one, and then I went on to a big Precision Ag conference in America. So it gave me a lot of contacts and a lot of opportunity to do some evaluation across those different regions. As we know, Australian farmers are fiercely independent and aren't subsidised, and work in quite a different way to the American systems, where a lot of their management is almost prescribed to them by the big companies, and in some respects, a farmer in America is kind of like considered what what we'd maybe more consider a farm worker. So a lot of the products are actually marketed towards somebody who's not such a decision maker, and I think generally the Australian market is a pretty tough market, because farmers really, as I said before, they want that reliability, they want that backup. They're not prepared to have all the bullshit of testing somebody's product for them and it falling over and they get no recompense or whatever. They go so far that Australian farmers are fantastic at being at helping and engaging and sharing information, and I don't blame them. But you only go so far, and some of these companies push their luck a little bit too hard, and others go away and really listen to what the farmers say and come back with a great product. So I think we're seeing some really interesting things happening in China, although there has been a lot of mimicking, shall we say, of other people's products, but they are really starting to move forward very dramatically across the number of hectares that are being variably rate managed and things like that. So I think a lot of the issues are the same, but we do need to have technology that understands our farming systems as well. So, simple things even, you mentioned John Deere earlier, and I remember there was a stage, I don't know whether it's been changed now, where you couldn't actually record faba beans as a crop in their management system. So,
I think all that little feedback from a farmer to them, where in probably other industries it is paid for research or something, but that if they can get that faba bean on there as the farmer, that would just sort of help simplify the process and automate what's going on hugely. But for this conversation and for our underlying theme for the year, it's building capacity, and Agtech probably can play a huge role in improving the flow of what we do on farm and allowing us to tackle other challenges on farm, like with the knowing where your water tank is 200 k's, 10 k's down the road without having to actually go there, or automated spraying out in the paddock, and you can just sort of let it go, tackle another job without that. How do you see Agtech's role within building capacity for the farmers themselves, relieving them from this overload?
Sorry about that.
Data centric.
So I guess something we haven't really touched, or I haven't really touched on properly, is as you mentioned, you've got technologies that help you do a job better, and then you've got technologies that really actually gather a lot of data, and you've got to actually analyze that data. And even if the technology is helping you now to analyze that data, you've really got to want to use more data, more information to make your decisions. So if you're going to use that, you've actually got to understand what the baselines are. And so hopefully where digital can really come in is to actually make us improve how we make decisions on our cropping or our production systems, rather than sort of continuing what we've always done with a few tweaks. It can give us the opportunity. So, for example, today I was listening to a presentation, and the software they were talking about has the ability to help you run on-farm trials. And you might go, oh yeah, ho-hum. But if you've really asked what you're trying to do, and then you take that on-farm trial software to compare two approaches, so it might be, maybe you've got a frosted area and you actually want to put different seed in that frosted area to see whether we can actually overcome the frost by variety management. That gives you the opportunity to run that as a really good on-farm trial. So with building capacity, I think, first thing, we don't have to go digital. These are tools, and they're going to suit some of us more than others. But let's face it, nobody's going to throw their mobile phone away. That's a form of digital to start with. So it's an opportunity that we have to make sure we look right for our own businesses. But I think it also offers the opportunity to build capacity in terms of the data that we can collect. Providing we've got good baseline data, then we can make better decisions against that information. And eventually we're going to find a lot more of the decisions and actions are automated. So there's a really nice example of with flood irrigation where traditionally you went out, you turned the pumps on, you let the flood irrigation run. As long as you didn't come back to it, basically, you might have known it would needed to run for a couple of hours, but something happened, so it runs for 4 hours instead of 2, blah, blah. And then you put in some soil moisture sensors, you put in some end stops, and the pump automatically gets turned off when the water's reached a certain point. You might also be better able to decide whether you need to irrigate at all in the first place. And then you really can get a lot more sophisticated when all of this information comes together and the pumps are able to be turned on and off by a system that's actually working out when rainfall is coming. So it's linking into the forecasting weather systems. It's linking into what the soil moisture probe's already saying. It's linking into your crop growth stage. A lot of those things that we currently do visually or manually, pulling it all together and actually managing your irrigation schedule for you. So, it goes back to that digitalized, digitally transformed again. And some of those scenarios are going to be appropriate for different actions on the farm, and some will carry on using relatively manual processes for a while. But I think digital is really exciting that it also encourages people from outside other industries coming into agriculture and the younger generations coming back in.
Certainly. So for 2024, what are you most excited about?
2024, what am I most excited about? Working on this new project that sadly I can't tell you anything about, but working with some new collaborators, and really it's going to be quite an exciting project that we're going to be taking forward across Australia in this whole digital adoption area.
It'll be coming out, released within this year?
It will be starting this year, certainly.
Yep, amazing.
Yeah, so watch this space.
We will be. We might have to get you on after as well. Throughout your experience, what was a piece of farms advice someone's given you, piece of knowledge you've taken along the way that helped you out?
The best piece of knowledge, when the ship flies duck.
Yeah, and what, not being the same one, what's a piece of farms advice you'd like to pass on for this episode?
I think that we're talking digital, so let's stick in that vein. You don't have to go digital. Look at what you really are going to gain some benefit from, and look at your whole process, and see which bits of that process you can digitalize and which pieces you want to. And then if there are big gaps in it, is it worth doing the small bits yet, or should you be waiting until you can actually do the whole process?
Amazing. And the last question to finish it off is, do you have any book recommendations? I started the Farms Advice Book Club, the Farmers Book Club on Instagram, and we're looking for some good recommendations.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a thing. I was recommended to read this called The Mind Strength Method by Jodie Lowinger. Yeah, I think some farmers might find that quite useful. We all have to be incredibly resilient.
Absolutely. Well, Emma, thank you so much for coming on and divulging a lot of things, but also keeping some cards closer to your chest. Been great to talk to you, find out about your experience, and I love your positioning of where it is. Not shoving everything down the throats of farmers, but coming from a unique space.
Thanks for the time, Jack, and I'll be following the podcast now.
As a farmer, I'd say that's a pretty refreshing episode from Emma. Thank you so much for giving up your time as well to see how you can improve the routines of farmers right across Australia. There's a dabble of people coming in from abroad now as well to see how we're doing it down under. But that's amazing. Make sure you're following us, subscribe to this podcast on your platforms, follow us on social media, Farms Advice, and we'll keep sharing the message of what we're doing, how we can improve. Agtech's a huge space. It's exciting. just knowing what's going to work for you. Until next Tuesday, keep on farming.